The Queen's cousin, Lord Mountbatten, has come out as gay, it says there. Sunday Telegraph has got a story about British soldiers facing a prosecution over the Iraq War, which they say is a betrayal. An interesting little story here. There's a new group, Leave Means Leave. That's Tory MPs who want a hard Brexit, have formed a new group to campaign inside the party. Finally, the Sunday Times there, again, war veterans featuring scandal of war vets, vanished charity funds. That's an investigation they've done. Various other interesting stories there. Big-headed babies are the brightest, particularly if they've got very, very big ears, it says. And finally, the Observer there, Jeremy Corbyn's plans to shift the party further to the left if he wins that leadership election at the end of the week. Labour members will be able to choose some of the shadow cabinet and have a more direct choice over policies. Now, so those are the papers. But before we dive into the papers in detail with my guests, I just want to highlight an interesting theme crackling through these pages and which, one way or another, we are going to be talking about throughout today's show. It is the death of liberalism. From John Major and Tony Blair right through to David Cameron, top politicians in this country have hunkered around a belief in economic liberalism, free markets, open borders, huge movements of money and people across Europe and the world. The great disruption of our age. But now, with a more conservative mood under Theresa May in Downing Street and Labour moving sharply to the left, that consensus seems to be over. Now, if so, it's a big turning point in our national life. Nigel Farage and Caroline Lucas, is that broadly what you think is happening?
I think there is a big change going on, not just in Britain, but actually right across the West. I mean, it all depends what liberalism means to you, doesn't it?
Very different.
And I look at it as a metropolitan elite, backed by big business, who've just been increasingly getting out of touch with ordinary voters. So we say Brexit was perhaps, in a way, the first big fight back against that, and I suspect we're going to see shocks in the American elections and across Europe too.
The idea that the metropolitan elite have some kind of monopoly over caring about values, about human rights, about those kinds of key social and environmental standards, I think is a bit of a Faragean myth, if I might say. You know, those are key values across our society, and I think they will continue. I wanted to start with
let's dive into the papers proper then.
Well,
and it's exactly the headline there says it all. Cameron makes a swift exit as PM buries his political legacy. Is Theresa May developing a new post-liberal conservatism? What's the answer?
Well, I'm just interested in how quickly history seems to be being rewritten, because part of this piece here in The Observer gives the impression that Cameron had, you know, quite a benign, cuddly kind of liberal conservatism, and now May is coming in with something that's far more radical, if you like. But let's not forget that under David Cameron, we saw a massive reduction in the size of the state. We saw welfare being rolled back. We saw the privatisation of the NHS. We've seen austerity laid out. So although David Cameron might have had a different language about it, I don't think we should imagine that this is such a great rupture.
And of course, Theresa May has said again and again that she wants to work for the people, the hard-working people at the sort of bottom third of society. And so we'll talk about that later on. But the big crunch in this government is going to be, again, over Brexit. Nigel Farage, I mentioned this Leave Means Leave group, but you've got an interesting story here. Nick Clegg, of all people, predicting a huge fight inside government between soft Brexit versus hard Brexit, and the whole thing just basically falling apart.
Yeah, I mean, Nick Clegg is busy today. You've got this, and he's written various other articles. The Lib Dems are gathering in Brighton. I think it's partly the Liberal Democrats wanting to be relevant and looking for sort of voter base amongst sort of hardline Remainers. The bit that I do agree with Clegg about is that it's pretty clear that the European Union, even though it's not in their interests, are going to start off negotiating by saying you will not have tariff-free access unless you accept the free movement of people. And it's a question of how the government responds to it. It's very interesting. I mean, last weekend, the Home Secretary, Amber Rudd, was saying all sorts of extraordinary things, like, you know, it might cost us 50 quid to buy a visa to go to Calais for a day trip. I mean, clearly not right, but it was as if I felt she was still fighting the referendum. Whereas, on the other hand, David Davis this week says, look, if there's no deal, so what? We'll just have World Trade Organization rules. And I do think, where Clegg is right, is this issue over the next 2 years does have the potential to split the Conservative cabinet quite dramatically.
Meanwhile, Jane, there's the ordinary voters wandering around, scratching their heads, wondering what to do next.
Yes.
And Barbara Ellen in The Observer has an interesting
I think she sort of sums up the mood, actually, among a lot of lifelong Labour voters. She is one. And she's saying a Corbyn victory is a strangely liberating feeling, but possibly not for the reasons that he would like. She's basically saying that, I mean, She calls it meaningless neo-hipster drivel. So I think she's nailed her colours to the mast there.
Not in favour generally.
Not in favour generally. And she says, enough is enough. Now it's the 11th hour. A different mood has landed. What else is out there? And she's looking at, you know, will she vote Tory? Obviously not. She's not a UKIP fan, obviously not. And she seems to be sort of pitching for the idea that the Labour Party will...
Well, she has the Greens
split.
And she has the Liberal Democrats. But the Liberal Democrats are down below 8% in some of the polls at the moment. They're very, very far down. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, in a moment. And you've also picked, there's a big Sunday Times investigation done with dispatches about the way that Momentum is digging into the Labour Party all across Britain to deselect MPs.
They've used secret cameras, but they probably didn't have to look very far to find this kind of activity. Momentum, who of course is the activists, are the people that Neil Kinnock did so well at sort of quashing when in his time. They're rising up again. They say here that they're already controlling Bristol. Dispatches has done this undercover investigation, and it says here, you know, Tom Watson, who of course is in the middle of all of this, has called Momentum rabble, but it's
very well organised rabble, if they're a rabble.
Dispatches is saying they're very well organised, very ambitious, and they've uncovered plans to put a Labour engagement officer in every local party.
Can we just be a bit careful, though, about these huge labels? Because an awful lot of people who've joined Labour, just as they've joined Greens and others, are genuinely excited about what could be a different kind of politics.
Right,
and this idea as well, that somehow the MPs should have to re-stand again for selection before they stand as an MP again. That, to me, is absolute common sense. That's democracy. You know, that's what happens in the Greens all the time. Why should it be the case that just because you have been an MP, you automatically get it?
Good, Caroline, but surely the idea is that they want to get elected. Otherwise, it's just a different kind of student politics
comes back to how you present the policies. The fact that you're actually appealing to more people.
But there's a disconnect here, isn't there? There's a big disconnect here. There's this big Labour debate going on, and clearly some pretty hard left figures looking to get the moderates out. Over half the Labour voters in the Midlands and the North voted for Brexit. I mean, there is nothing in today's Labour Party that's even speaking to those people. And I think what was really interesting was the effect that UKIP had on the Labour Party at the last general election made a big difference in terms of the Tories getting a majority. And I have a... I mean, of course, I'm retired now, but I have a feeling...
Of course, I'm retired.
Nigel, you might remember.
But I have a feeling that everything that is going on here potentially gives UKIP a real opportunity with the Labour vote.
But you were assuming that people who are voting...
Just jump in for a second. I'm so sorry, Caroline. Your comrade in arms and funder, Aaron Banks, has talked about UKIP, as it were, becoming a kind of mass movement, a mass popular movement, a bit like Momentum. And I wonder, when you see how Momentum is operating, holding meetings and organising right across the country, whether you don't feel a bit jealous. Do you think, actually, that's the kind of thing we ought to be doing on our side of the politics?
I think that's exactly what Aaron Banks is going to do. I mean, he built this Leave.eu vehicle. He's got 1 million online supporters. That's exactly what he intends to do. And there are some big examples out there. I mean, the Five Star Movement in Italy is a completely online political party. It's now at 30% in the polls. So there is a very new kind of politics out there that can be highly effective.
You just said there you've resigned, but obviously you're having a lot of say. Are you going to be sort of like the Ted Heath of UKIP?
No, absolutely. Perished. I mean, some awful things have been said to me over the years, but goodness me. Yeah. No, I'm going to go on...
You seem to be saying a lot about it, about the new order.
I'm going to go on as an MEP. I lead a group in the European Parliament, so I'll go on with my helpful contributions over there. But no, we have a new leader, Diane James. I'm going to let her get on with it. I'm not going to meddle at all.
There you go. Heard it from the horse's mouth. Now then, let's move to another story, Caroline, you've chosen here. A really, really big global story. 65 million people are displaced, 20 million people are fleeing for their lives. And this is a map of the world, and the red routes are where the migrants are moving all around the world. And it's very interesting. You run through the countries here where they're running from. They've all got big wars going on. It's about war, this, isn't it?
It's absolutely about war. It's about the abuse of human rights in places like Eritrea. I mean, it's a hideous picture of people on the move. And if you add in, of course, with climate change coming very soon, that's going to mean even more people on the move. But I think this is a story also about 2 summits coming up and real concerns this next week. The countries are not facing up to their responsibilities. Of course, we remember that David Cameron had a summit for people to give finance towards the Syrian refugee crisis. Only 1/6 of the money that was pledged back in February has actually been given. We absolutely need the government to be doing more. Big march in London yesterday, big message saying, look, you promised to follow the Alf Dubs Amendment, these 3,000 unaccompanied children. You know, they should be out of the camps in Calais. We've had about 20 maximum so far. So this is a story both of a magnitude of a challenge, but an absolute paucity of political response.
And, of course, it's changing politics in the places to which these migrants are going. You have been, Nigel Farage, standing alongside Donald Trump, who talked about his wall. Can I ask you what you made of him, you know, up close and personal? He says some pretty extraordinary and, to our ears, quite ferocious things.
I mean, he's a reality TV star. He's used to the big, brash statement that gets a whole load of publicity. It's what he does. And he shocks a few people. All I can tell you is on a one-on-one, I watched him with 50 people, donors from Mississippi, and I watched him interact with them, talk to them. He's very, very good with people. Yeah. And that's why he's...
I
think what's happened is he's got a new campaign team.
He's had media training,
and they've actually got him on message a bit.
Yeah.
He's been a lot better over the course of the last month, and I think he's now on... I mean, I do genuinely believe he's on course to win.
And jumping from America to Europe, you've got a story about Hungary, because Viktor Orban in Hungary is holding a referendum on no refugees at all being allowed into Hungary.
The 2nd of October is quite a big day. You've got that referendum, but also there's a rerun of the Austrian presidency, and the Freedom Party, who are, you know, a pretty hard right party, are favourites to win that. Orban's popularity, the last opinion polls I saw, his party was on 47%, with the nearest party at about 20%. So he has got a massive, clear, huge level of support in Hungary, and what he's saying is, we will not pay for Angela Merkel's mistakes. Angela Merkel said, we can cope with as many people as can come. And what Merkel and the EU have said is that each country that's part of Schengen has to take quotas. They're not going to do it.
You're a man of the right. Are you a little nervous when you see the way the right has developed in Eastern Europe?
Yes. I mean, quite frankly, some of the movements that have sprung up there are pretty scary. I have to say, on all this debate about Brexit and how long is it going to take, it may well be the EU doesn't exist. Because I think, you know, I mean, quite honestly, the row that is going on between Germany and those eastern countries over migrants and quotas, I think it's the most serious crisis the EU's yet faced.
Very interesting. Jane, we mentioned America there. You've got another story. Hillary Clinton.
Going back to Donald, of course, who I do think's had media training. Donald, don't be yourself, has been the general thing to him, I think. And we've got Hillary Clinton, of course, on the other. And I love this picture with Jimmy Fallon regarding her pneumonia being infectious. He's got his mask on here. But America, the phrase in America is, we're a country of 300 million, and this is the best we can do. And it's people saying, well, I will vote for Hillary because I don't like Trump, not because they particularly like Hillary, and vice versa.
Let's scuttle back home again. And a very interesting story you've chosen from the business section of the Sunday Telegraph, Caroline, about the EDF bills that are going to be coming in soon.
Yeah, this is the story, of course, about Hinkley, and quite a few of the Sunday papers are still kind of poring over the decision that was made for the Hinkley nuclear power station. The deal's been done on Hinkley, but it's quite interesting that we've got the front page of business here, but also Jeremy Warner inside the business page is also saying, well, Hinkley's going to happen, but is Sizewell B, is that absolutely got to happen as well? And Bradwell, these are the things that China wants to be able to build that are linked to Hinkley, but basically which lock us into yet more nuclear. And it is interesting, and of course, you know, the EDF boss was the one who famously said that by next year, 2017, we'd be, you know, cooking our turkeys off the energy from Hinkley. Well, I think the turkey's going to get a bit cold before we're going to get around to doing that. But it just strikes me as really interesting that the Sunday Telegraph in particular is just looking at the costs of this and just saying it is absolutely madness.
And it's very expensive electricity as well.
It is.
You know, they've guaranteed this 35-year strike price. It's a rotten deal.
It's double the price of wholesale electricity.
We review the papers, and in reviewing the papers, we reveal which headlines may not be entirely accurate. Jane Moore.
UKIP nude dip by Nigel. Now, I'd just like to point out here, Nigel reliably informs me that this is a mock-up and isn't his actual body.
I mean, sort of 18-stone fatty.
It does say nude dip, but actually in the intro it does say bursting into a wedding party almost naked after skinny dipping.
You were actually wearing your boxers or your pants.
I was.
And I think if you're wearing a pair of properly stitched Jeremy Paxman underpants, you are not skinny dipping.
I agree with that, and it was lovely. The water was great. It was great fun doing it.
Last thing to do as UKIP leader, Nigel Farage.